waiting for the plug to go in, and then I'll start. I'm just waiting for the plug to go in. There. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the IGF 2019 Open Consultations Day. It's going to be followed by the MAG meeting for tomorrow and the next day. Just a reminder before we start that this meeting is being recorded and webcast, and there's a transcript. The transcript is going to be published on the IGF website after the meeting tonight and also for the next couple of days. We will be using the speaking queue, and the link to the speaking queue is available on the IGF website on the front page. With that, I will hand it over to Lynn St. Amour, our chair, to start the meeting.
Thank you, and good morning, good afternoon, and evening, because I know we have some participants participating online. The first order of business is approval of the agenda. The agenda was published some time ago on the website. I will have some opening remarks in a moment, but let me see if there are any specific requests for any other business, AOB. Not seeing any requests, we will call the agenda approved. And as Chengetai said, this is the open consultation day. So when we came into the room, there were MAG member signs on the table here, and somebody who was more caffeinated than I pointed out that really they probably shouldn't be there to encourage those participants that are here that are not MAG members to actually take a seat at the table. This is the day when we ask the MAG members to listen to the community. We ask them to refrain from taking the mic unless they are actually representing their organization or wearing very clearly another hat. And specifically, that's to ensure that there's enough time to hear from community members. So we're all facing, I think, challenging times on many fronts, both policy and development areas. 50% of the world is still not connected. There are increasing calls for regulation and concerns that any actions that are taken are rights respecting at the same time. Platform misuse by various parties, and still too little representation from the developing world in internet governance processes everywhere. And while I believe that the IGF and the IGF community processes are better than most, I think we all requests for help and for engagement from many quarters, governments, UN notably, certainly from private sector, calls for civil society, greater engagement on their behalf. And of course, we all want the internet and all these types of open, inclusive, multi-stakeholder process to be a central part of making the world a better place. So with that in mind, we're really interested in hearing from the community on what we can do to improve all aspects of the IGF processes, whether it's annual meeting preparations, it's intercessional works, it's the working of the MAGs, or in fact the working of the MAG chair as well. This really is our opportunity to open up and discuss the things that we think are important to the advancement of the internet governance and certainly to the improvements of the IGF at the same time. So we'll have some other introductory remarks as we go through the various parts of the agenda. But what I'd like to do right now is welcome Dr. Daniela Brunstrup, who is the Honorary Host Country Co-Chair. And she's going to make a few remarks and then unfortunately needs to leave for a short period of time to go across town to the Internet Jurisdiction Conference, which is running in parallel, but then we'll be back shortly thereafter. So Daniela, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Lynn. And welcome to everybody here or somewhere else. I would like to welcome you to the face-to-face meeting, but of course also to the Ministry of Economic Affairs and Energy. And I'm doing this also on behalf of our minister, who unfortunately can't be here today, but he's sending his regards. You certainly have recognized that the ministry is situated right at the center of Berlin. You have very nearby the famous hospital, the Charité, which is the tower right next to us. And at the other side of the channel, There is the Hamburger Bahnhof, the station going to Hamburg. In former times you had a lot of different stations in Berlin, like you have today still in Paris, for example, and the trains from right here were going to the north. And today this is a museum of contemporary art, and in case you have some time, maybe some of you are staying over the weekend, I can recommend that very heartily to you, so maybe you take advantage to visit it. The wall was going right across the bridge you might have crossed when you came from the station, because the border between the eastern and the western part of Berlin was quite at the middle of the channel that is the neighbor of our ministry. So you are sitting now in the former eastern part of Berlin, but the west was right across the channel. The oldest part of the ministry is not this building, but that are the two buildings that are in parallel to the one building that you can see over there if you're in the room. So the oldest buildings were a former invalids hospital that was founded by the Prussian King Friedrich II in the 18th century already. So this building is more recent, from the beginning of the last century, and it was founded as a military medical academy originally by William II, and then it served also as the Ministry for Labor in the 1920s, and later as a court in Eastern Germany, and finally as a hospital again. Today we are meeting in the so-called org room, because you see a lot of org here, and that was usually the dinner hall for the younger cadets. They learned here the virtues of an officer, such as, for example, dancing, and that's why we have the opportunity to meet in such a nice meeting room. Today, here at this site, 1,400 people work for the ministry, and maybe you know we have also another site still at Bonn, the former Western German capital, that are about 300 other people there. Dear colleagues, concerning the preparations of the IGF, I think we are making very good progress. The cooperation with everyone involved is going extremely well, I think, and my deepest thanks to all of you, to the Secretariat, to you and ESA, and of course to our chair Lynn, for all the work that has been undertaken in the last weeks. I also want to thank all of you as the MAG members who devoted your time and commitment concerning the workshop evaluation process. This has been a bunch of work for all of you, and I think that it has created very good results. The IGF enjoys a great deal of attention and support from the German government and the German IGF stakeholders as well. You already know that Chancellor Merkel will officially open the IGF on Tuesday at 2 p.m. Maybe that's new to you. The opening with the Chancellor will be at 2 p.m. In the run-up to November, there are some important steps outside our MAG structure that I want to mention. We had a very successful outreach meeting in New York in mid-May. My Director General Stefan Schnorr and USG Liu Ximin had welcomed representatives from all stakeholder groups to a side event on the IGF in the margins of the Science, Technology and Innovation Multi-Stakeholder Forum of the UN. It became quite clear that the IGF and its well-established multi-stakeholder structures can serve as a model to other UN fora. We had also a very successful meeting of the third annual conference Internet and Jurisdiction Policy Network here in Berlin. That is still going on, as Lynn already mentioned. We have also a shuttle, so people who are there can come to the open consultation in the afternoon, and I hope they will do that. And our host country website, that will be updated right now, will then show our key visual. And now this is the time for Rudolf to show the key visual. Of course, you will find also on the website and on the key visual our motto: one world, one net, one vision. Practical information on the registration procedures, etc., will be added end of July to the website. And finally, we'll have two major intersessional activities coming up that are the EuroDIC in The Hague at the 19th and 20th of June and the German IGF on the 11th of September. Unfortunately, the Minister will not be able to come today, but we will have the honor to see Thomas Jatzombeck at 2 o'clock. He will join us. Thomas Jatzombeck is a member of the German Parliament, and he is one of, you can say, the fathers of the idea to host the IGF in Germany. He was pushing very hard to finance the IGF and to host it, and he has been also the speaker for the CDU on digital policy issues for several years, so he's really an expert on the field. He's also now the coordinator for aerospace policies of the federal government of Germany, and I'm looking forward to that, and he's also looking forward to discussing with you. He will even be able to stay and answer some of your questions. Unfortunately, I will have to leave right now, but I will be back then after lunch, and I'm looking forward to the discussions. Have a very good morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniela. Next on the agenda, we have a welcome from United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs, UNDESA, Mr. Dennis Usar, who was also with us at the second MAG meeting and open consultation. So Dennis, you have the floor.
Thank you, Lynn. Good morning, everyone. My name is Dennis Usar, and I'm delivering this opening remarks on behalf of our director, Mr. Juwang Su. He's the director of the Division for Public Institutions and Digital Government. As you all know, UNDESA is designated by the Secretary General to manage the IGF since 2007. And has been managing the Secretariat and supporting the Secretary General in that regard. First of all, we thank our host, the Minister of Economic Affairs and Energy, for hosting us here. This is the first time a host country financially supports the organization of MAG meeting and open consultation at the host venue. And Germany has committed itself to strengthening the IGF's multi-stakeholder approach by reaching out to new stakeholder groups like non-digital businesses, citizens and parliamentarians, and also strengthening the IGF's inter-sessional activities. And also thanks to the MAG members who are here. We know that we are almost complete in the workshop selection, and also some of the MAG members could not join us because of the end of Ramadan. So also we say Eid Mubarak to them to celebrate their festival. So some updates from UNDESA. First, about the next host country. I'm happy to inform you that our Undersecretary General signed the acceptance letter for hosting the next IGF in 2020 in Poland. So just for the background, there was a lot of active discussion with other UN agencies, especially with Economic Commission Africa to host an IGF in Africa. But given that we are already in June and also appreciating Poland's early commitment and also the time they need to prepare properly for the next IGF, we expedited the process, and the letter is now with the Polish mission to the UN in New York. So we are looking forward to working with our Polish colleagues in the next few months to start preparation. So that's about the next host country, as promised from the last MAG meeting. And also, as you know, the MAG renewal process is in place, also including the MAG chair. We are very We are working on that, and also we are very sad that this is Lynn's last year, and we appreciate a lot her efforts, but I'm also sure that she will be working with the next MAC chair, and IGF community will continue to benefit from her experience. So the deadline for that is 30 June for the MAC renewal, and we can explain further if there are any questions. Daniela briefly mentioned about the side event that UNDESA German mission and the UAE mission organized during the STI forum. The event was well participated by the delegates in New York. It was more like a briefing to them, and I know that we promised to share meeting notes, and that will come to your site very soon. But if I can just highlight that conclusion, IGF was seen as a valuable platform, and there it was noted that Paris IGF gave clear messages for improving the IGF, and IGF should continue to evolve. And in that regard, the initiative of Germany involving parliamentarians was noted and appreciated by the delegates in New York. And there was also a call for more underrepresented stakeholders should be involved in the intersessional activities and annual meeting of the IGF, which I think we are going to that direction with the support of Germany. Another update from UNDESA is we are inviting all the UN heads to the annual meeting. There will be a letter coming from the Under-Secretary General to all UN heads, and we are hoping that there will be some more active participation and high-level participation from UN agencies in November here. High-level political forum. This is the forum that UNDESA organizes to track the progress in SDGs. It will take place during ECOSOC, Economic and Social Commission, in July, and also during the General Assembly in September. And it's expected that digitalization and new technologies will be featured discussion. As you know, also HLPDC, High-Level Panel on Digital Cooperation, will officially launch its report on 10th of June, which is this Monday. There will be a live webcast conversation with the Secretary General and the co-chairs at 10:45 online. There will also be a briefing to member states in the afternoon on the same day. So, as UNDESA, we support that IGF can provide a space to discuss the recommendations of this report, and we are also ready to support the community in that regard. And I think the outcomes of the HLBDC report can only be good for IGF, and I think it's perfect time to be a MAC member and also to host the next IGF as Germany at this juncture. And I think there will only be positive things coming out of HLPDC report for IGF, as we also heard from the briefing at the last MAC meeting. So to conclude, let me thank again Germany, not just hosting but also being a new donor in supporting the Global South Fund, and also let us appreciate other donors. Special thanks to multi-year donors, especially the Netherlands, and hope more donors can commit to multi-year pledge to ensure continued support of the IGF Secretariat. And of course, we also invite new institutions, governments and private sector to contribute to the IGF Trust Fund. Again, as DESA, we are ready to support the MAC and do anything we can to make your work easier. We wish you a successful MAC meeting and open consultation. And also for the non-MAC members who are in the room, thank you for being here today in the open consultation. and have a nice meeting.
Thank you, Dennis, and thank you to the continued support from DESA as well. As we said earlier, I think these are both challenging times and exciting times, and that usually means there's lots of opportunities as well. The next item on the agenda is a briefing on the state of preparations from the IGF Secretariat. This would be the time when I had one or two requests and said, would this be an appropriate time to bring up a question or a proposal on newcomers and that sort of thing. At the end of this next agenda item would be a great time to bring up any general kind of questions or comments on anything having to do with the annual meeting itself and or overall IGF processes. I can appreciate that perhaps that wasn't really clear in the process. And again, we're trying to make the briefings that come from the MAG or the Secretariat both brief so that we facilitate and allow time for community interaction. And we're also trying to manage the communications across the upcoming MAG meeting for the next 2 days and this one, and hopefully not have a lot of redundancy between the updates. So the Secretariat is trying kind of very thoughtfully to manage their updates to the meeting here, and will key off of that for any subsequent updates in the next 2 days for the MAG meetings. Another way to say that would be all MAG members should also pay attention, because this is not likely to be repeated on day 2 and day 3. So with that, Chengetai, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Lynn. I'll just start off, first of all, with the deadlines that are coming soon. The deadline is for travel support applications, and this is, as you've heard, is thanks very much to the generous support of the German government. We are in a position this year to offer travel support, and the IGF Secretariat and UNDESA has identified 31 underrepresented countries, and 67 of those, and also 67 underrepresented countries which have been historically at the IGF. So what we did is that we went through the participation statistics, and we identified these countries, and we are waiting for applications from those countries, and once these applications have come in, we will make a determination on whom to give travel support. It's not just for underrepresented countries, it's also for people who are coming to do something at the IGF, that is, for workshops, etc. And the deadline is the 30th of June, because next week we should be able to know which workshops have been approved for the agenda, and we hope to publish a draft schedule. And then people can also apply if they have a role in the workshop process or any other sessions within the IGF. Registration for the IGF 29 meeting will open up in July. We want to open it up early this time, so that if you have any issues with visas, etc., you can come to us and seek for advice, and we can also help with letters to the mission. The German government has already informed all their embassies worldwide that there is the IGF coming, so that is taken care of. There is the MAG renewal, and the deadline for nominations is also the 30th of June. This year is the smallest rotation. We only have 7 available seats, and information on that is available on the IGF website, and we currently have 52 members of the MAG. Next year we want to reduce it to 50 so that everything is equal. All stakeholder groups have their 10-10-10 with governments 20, so there's no ambiguity on how many seats each stakeholder groups has. The disproportion has just happened because historically MAG members have dropped out because they've changed jobs or they couldn't continue, so we had to add a MAG member here and there. So this year we just want to reset it and make it more, to rationalize it. There's also proposals for the MAG chair, and as I understand it, there's a little bit of uncertainty about this. So what the IGF Secretariat has done is written to the various groups within the MAG, so the government community, the private sector, civil society, and the technical community, and to ask those members within the MAG to coordinate the names and to select 3 names and forward them to the IGF Secretariat, who will in turn forward them to DESA, who will in turn forward them to the Secretary General's office for his consideration. These 3 names do not have to come from these specific stakeholder groups, because the MAG chair is the chair of the whole MAG, so the private sector group can nominate somebody from civil society if they think that that person is the best person to lead their MAG, the MAG for next year. They'll have very big shoes to fill in, but we can try. I also want to underline that it is not a given that these names that the name will be chosen by the Secretary General's office. This is just a community effort, and we don't really know what the effect as well of the HLPDC report will have on the IGF and this process. The HLPDC report might recommend something that has an effect on the IGF and also has an effect on how the Secretary General sees the IGF and how he might want to restructure it or whatever. I mean, this is all up in the air, so I just want to manage expectations, so to speak. If you have any other questions on this process, please just feel free to ask after this. As also indicated in the donors meeting and just now, we do have our capacity development program that we have initiated this year, and it is aimed to, it is focused on strengthening the local communities by supporting the national and regional IGF meetings, and this is mainly for the Global South and particularly least developed countries and small island development states. We've done a first round, and Anya has been in communication with those ones that have been selected for this round, and hopefully we can continue this next year as well, but this is all depending on the funds. For the schedule, on the IGF website under documentation, we do have a draft template for the schedule. This year, we've tried to listen to the input that we received at the end of last year and also during the first open consultations and MAG meeting, trying to streamline the IGF 29 meeting. So we are going to have 3 streams, as most of you know, and we're going to concentrate these 3 streams to two workshop rooms per stream, and we are going to have an introductory section and also a concluding session for each of the 3 streams, and that will also help us collect usable input from the discussions that have been held during the IGF. And at the end of the IGF, just before the closing ceremony, we're going to have a bringing it all together session where we're going to have a report in from these 3 streams, as well as from the open forums, dynamic coalitions, and any other session that has happened during the IGF. We didn't do it last year, and we used to do it at the beginning, but I think it's a good idea to reintroduce this. So that will be 6 streams for the workshops, and we are going to have 2 workshop rooms dedicated to everything else. That's the open forums, dynamic coalitions, best practice forums, etc. So it'll be easier for people to navigate. You don't have to run from one workshop room to another one across the venue. It's all going to happen in 1 or 2 workshop rooms that are close together. We've also lengthen the time between the sessions so that there's ample time for people to get off the stage and the next workshop panelists to get on the stage. Last year there was a suggestion that we do this because some workshops were bleeding into the other workshops. So hopefully this will help. We did have our third and final planning meeting yesterday. That's the IGF Secretary, Giandesa, and the host country organizing committee. We had the final planning meeting at the Esrael Hotel, and I'm pleased to report that everything is either on schedule or ahead of schedule. I think this place is the biggest place that we've ever held an IGF, and it is very well equipped, so I don't think there's going to be any issues that we've had previously, like noise bleeding from one room to the other room. Also with the venue, there is going to be food and refreshments offered in a food court, and there's going to be a subsidized ticket that you can buy for the food, and I think that is thanks to the host country, and thank you very much for that, especially for people coming from the Global South. It'll make it easier for them. And they are going to give a bus pass or a local transport for the bus, the train, and the trams for participants. The IGF Village is also there. There's going to be TV screens, lockable desks, chairs for the meeting, and the list of people who have been allocated booths is on the IGF website, so you can take a look at that as well. One thing that I was asked to stress is that we are trying to be as paperless as possible, so there's no real need to bring in, a lot of material. I mean, we can give you QR code stickers so people can scan it and download the material. And it's also very difficult for people who are traveling from long distances to carry this material back home. That being said, there's still going to be that function that if people want to bring in certain items for the IGF Village, that they can do it duty-free. For bilateral rooms, we have a very large number of bilateral rooms. In total, we have about 21 bilateral rooms. So that's also an issue that's been looked at from the reports that we had from last year's meetings. The workshop rooms, as we said, we do have workshop rooms with a large capacity between 80 and 300 participants. We have not configured them yet. We're waiting for the final selection of the sessions, and then we will give the venue organizers the list and tell them how many rooms of what configuration, and we can configure. I mean, these rooms are quite large, and we can configure them any way we want to. There is going to be some special evening events. The first one is the music night, which we would like to encourage participants to come in, and if you know how to play instruments or sing or do something musical, please contact the IGF Secretariat, and we will try and build an interesting program for participants. And for those people who are from the USA, we are going to have a Thanksgiving special on Thursday night, so it will not be that bad being away from home, and that's thanks very much to the host country as well. We don't, again, I mean, visas is always an issue. We don't foresee that many problems with visa issues, and we do encourage people to please apply for visas as early as possible, and the IGF Secretariat stands ready to help with any visa issues, and if there are any real visa issues that we can't help with, of course, we'll also refer to our German host who will help. I'll stop there. I don't know if, Rudolph, do you have anything to say? And if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you, Chengetai. And as someone who has cooked far too many Thanksgiving dinners for 20 people and up, I'm looking forward to being on the other end and not doing the cooking and cleaning. We've had two substantive updates, both from Dennis on a number of topics and from Chengetai. So I'd like to open it up specifically to the floor to see if there are any comments or questions. And while people are navigating the queue system, also take the opportunity to really thank Poland for their offer to host the IGF in 2020. As Dennis said, they did come in quite early. Krzysztof Subert, who is a MAG member, was previously with the Polish government, was instrumental in kicking off that discussion some years ago, probably close to 3 years ago or so. So we're very, very appreciative, and Poland has been very excited about hosting in 2020. At the WSIS summit in Geneva in April, there were a number of delegation meetings with various ministers from the Polish government, as well as from a number of other entities that are really interested in building on the really strong example from Germany with respect to broadening participation and reaching out to other communities. So I think that's excellent, excellent news. In the speaking queue, we have Jim Pendergrass. We do really encourage people to use it because it levels the playing field between those people that are in the room and those that are online. We, as we usually do, will take exceptions, but if you could use the speaking queue, that would be excellent. So Jim, you have the floor.
Yes, Lynn, thanks. Good morning, Jim Prendergast with the Galway Strategy Group. Chengetai, you had mentioned that we have a very small turnover with the number of MAG members this year, which, if I do the math correctly, means that we'll have 43 members of the MAG turning over the next 2 years, which is a pretty big number. And you lose a lot of institutional knowledge, history, et cetera, when you have that kind of turnover. Is there any effort underway to look at maybe smoothing that transition and that turnover so it's a little more equal over the course of the 3-year terms? Thanks.
Yes, that's true. And as I say that this has happened because, first of all, we instituted the 3-year limit, and then, of course, there had to be large turnover then, and also because of dropouts. People drop out for various reasons. They've changed jobs, they've moved, etc. It's very difficult too, unless we either for 1 year people have 4-year terms, or 1 year people only have 2-year terms. It's something that we've been thinking about, how we can actually do it without having a total reset, and then people are not going to be very happy about that. But I'm open to ideas as well. Because yes, it is rather strange that we have 7 this year, and then next year we have 20, and the next year we have 25 or whatever. Yeah. Mm.
Thank you, Chengetai. Next in the queue is Veni Markowski. You have the floor.
Thanks, Lynn. I just wanted to preemptively answer some of the comments that we may hear about having yet another European country hosting the IGF. Under the UN division, Poland is actually in the East European group, as far as I remember. So technically, we are in another UN region. So, and for me, coming from Eastern Europe, that's actually a big achievement that we're going to have the IGF there, and that the Polish government is so willing to host us. And I hope that they will also follow the example of the German government, the French, the Swiss, to have it at the appropriate high level, and also maybe find some resources to support participation from underserved regions. Thank you.
And I think that's a very important point to emphasize. And while it may be close geographically, it is, as you say, a very separate region within the UN system. And frankly, I think a lot of the issues in the context there is different as well from the more western part of Europe. Next we have Jorge. And I just have one quick question. Carlos, I'm not sure if you were signaling to be in the queue or not. No? So Jorge, you have the floor.
Thank you so much. Jorge Cancios, Swiss government, former host of the IGF 2017. So my first words would go to the next host, to the Polish government. Congratulate you. Thank you so much, because this is one of the biggest ways of showing compromise, engagement with this multi-stakeholder forum, and we can only offer our advice, our help, whatever you may need, and I guess all the other countries, our French friends, our German friends, we will be very happy to continue this evolution into making important improvements during these last years. I also wanted to react to something that our colleague from UNDESA mentioned. I think, and this is also important for both Germany, of course, and Poland as hosts, that these are very exciting times, and there is a very good opportunity as a follow-up to the report that is coming from the high-level panel on digital cooperation, and we'll see how the UN Secretary General reacts to it. But I think it's a great opportunity to put all this good work at value, and to react in a very positive fashion, and showing all what the IGF and this community can deliver. So I would very much welcome that, also following the steps of the European IGF, the EuroDIC, which will be devoting a specific track of discussions to the high-level panel recommendations, that we include this somehow into the program. And this is not only something that we will need to discuss this year, but of course next year, and it will be great to have those discussions and to put our multi-stakeholder cooperation at the next level. And finally, as to capacity development, I very much welcome this effort, and of course the funding that makes this possible. We are happy to collaborate to the extent possible, be it directly or be it through the Geneva Internet Platform, which we support. And this leads me to the very last remark. This is about money, and this is about funding. We have to put the money where we put our words, and thanks to the German government and to the Finnish government, we have now a more or less break-even situation, but we need that the funding of this arrangement, of this forum, of this process, is really supported by all the stakeholder groups. So I really call upon every one of us, of all stakeholder groups, to put the money where we want to have our multi-stakeholder model. Thank you.
Thank you, Jorge. If I could just kind of build on your last point as well. I like really simple messages when it comes to fundraising. So roughly the funds that we're bringing in, if you take aside the one-off contributions from Germany for capacity development, basically cover roughly about half of what the budgeted request was when the 10-year project document was put into place. That was looking for $2.8 million a year for secretariat expenses and for some developing country travel support. The kind of interim budget was at half that, at 1.4 million, and we're roughly bringing in $1 million. That is limiting our ability to fully staff the secretariat according to what the resource plan was. And while everybody is really keen to do more, we need additional resources within the secretariat in order to do that. As so many people have said, we're just in awe of how much work the secretariat is able to get done. with a relatively small number of resources. But at some point, I think we do as a community need to step up and properly resource the IGF so it can be all we all want it to be. And one other comment to that as well with respect to host countries. You know, the IGF is a UN event held under UN rules and protocols. For the IGF to go to a country, we need to be invited by the government of that country. This isn't go find a conference venue and get some sponsorships like so many of the other conferences. It is a formal commitment on the part of the government to host a United Nations event. And there's a whole series of protocols. So we can only go where we're invited and where there is support. And again, that's why we are so thankful to the number of European countries and certainly to Poland for 2020 that they have stepped up and supported that. But if anybody wants any more information on what that process looks like or how you can trigger some interest in your own countries, you know, I, Chengetai or Dennis would be very happy to spend some time with everyone. So with that, we have the next person in the queue is Marilyn Cade, who's an online participant. I think we should be able to hear you in the room, Marilyn, but if not, people will need to put their headphones on. So Marilyn, you have the floor. Or you can read the transcript, as Venny is pointing out. Marilyn, you have the floor.
Thank you, Len. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak at the open consultation, and I want to make a very strong appeal for further improvements in, I'm going to use the word marketing, the benefit and opportunity to provide comments from the broader non-MAG community during open consultation. A lot has already been done, but I do think that there are some challenges in encouraging people to find the time to be online, to contribute during the open consultation. So not to focus on this too much today, but to say that one improvement I hope we can consider for the future is perhaps looking at different approaches so stakeholder groups take more time to prioritize providing comments and feedback during the open consultation. So just to reinforce how important I think this day really is to support the bottom-up, consensus-based, informed participation, and then decision-making by the MAG. Of course, joining with others with special appreciation for Germany's very considerable financial support, but also the bully pulpit support that the German government is providing in engaging with other governments and with their business community and others within Germany to create very strong awareness about the importance of this event and about participating. Following the excellent participation, engagement of the French government, I see even more focus on this area from Germany, and particular thanks to the funding and the fact that there's now funding available to help to do capacity building for, in particular, strengthening the NRIs from some of the very challenged countries where multi-stakeholder is not a term that is well understood or even appreciated. I was thrilled to see the announcement of Poland. I'm very familiar, since I've spent so much of my business life in engaging in the UN system, that in fact, yes, Eastern Europe is a unique region, a separate region, and I think that the participation and the continuity and the fact we already know who the host country is will help us to have 2020 as a launching pad, hopefully, to then also engaging host invitations for 2021, 2022, and beyond. Now, I want to make a comment about the question that was asked about how to deal with smoothing the transition and strengthening the ability for a large number of MAG members to get on board and sort of jumpstart their participation. I think it's very possible to plan an effective onboarding process. We do that at ICANN. And I say we, I mean the community, with some support from the ICANN staff. But an effective onboarding program could, once the MAG is named very early, part of the assumption and commitment of those MAG members who are new and incoming should be to engage in effective onboarding activities. So they're not just coming into a briefing on the day of the MAG, but there are specific activities, webinars, and perhaps even mentoring by previous MAG members to help to get new MAG members who are totally unfamiliar. Many will be very familiar, but that might be a way to deal with the large number of the changeover. Finally, I have a comment about the high-level panel on digital cooperation. I see a lot of interest from some of the national level NRIs in understanding this report and even being able to consider how to comment on what its recommendations are. Even though their programs are already fixed, there are many NRIs that are still planning their programs, and I hope that the high-level panel will not stop at Eurodig, as fortunate as that invitation is, but will also take very seriously the opportunity to engage, even if it's remotely, with NRIs that are still being scheduled throughout the year, and take on board the comments from a very wide and distributed number of participants that may not even be able to attend the IGF, but they're very active in their own national level initiative. Thank you.
Thank you, Marilyn. Very good and comprehensive set of comments. And just a quick point, to agree completely, as I know the Secretary does, with respect to the open consultation process. And in fact, when we looked at ways to get early feedback from the community on what would make a good consultation, a community process, a good consultation, we actually thought about perhaps doing a survey and getting some suggested topics. But by the time we actually got around to thinking about that, it was actually too close to the time of the meeting to do well or to do effectively. But I think there's some good suggestions there. We're looking for more as well. I mean, this is a day we want to hear from the community, so to the extent we can actually make it as robust as possible would be in everybody's interest. Also totally agree on the onboarding process, and we have taken some steps in the past few years to do that. It's certainly greatly facilitated by an early appointment of the MAG members, and in fact, if there's an overlap between ingoing and outgoing MAG members, that's facilitated as well. But we are taking a careful look at that, and I know DESA is doing everything they can to work within the UN system for the, again, very timely appointment of the MAG. And with respect to the HLPDC, a number of people feel that it's too early to comment on it because, of course, we haven't seen the report yet. But the Secretariat is prepared to post the report on Monday using the commenting platform that was used for the DESA retreat a few years ago. And in fact, it's a pretty common platform that many use. So we're working to a schedule to actually get the report up and available on the Monday so that we can facilitate both a discussion amongst the community members, and we have some more work to do in terms of thinking what that process might look like downstream. But as a first level, as I said, the Secretariat is making the facility available to use that online commenting platform to begin kind of understanding the report and hopefully moving any good ideas forward. With that, Christoph, we have Christoph in the queue. You have the floor.
Yeah, thank you, Lynn. Ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, first of all, I would like to thank you on behalf of Poland for the positive decision from the United Nations perspective. So we are really very happy to host the IGF in 2020. As Lynn mentioned, I started the process almost 2 years ago with my team from the Ministry of Digital Affairs. At that time, I've been acting as a Secretary of State in the Ministry and the Government Plenipotentiary for Digital Single Market. So the multi-stakeholder approach was very much in my vision, perspective, and idea I had on the internet development. Then I decided to back to my previous life, like a year ago, to business. So I'm now representing the business and tech community, but I've decided still to support Poland and my colleague, the Minister of Digital Affairs, Marek Zagórski, to continue with the process and to finalize, get the positive decision. So having said that, thank you again for that decision. I hope I see you all in 2020 in Poland. Very soon we'll decide on the city. Hopefully it will be a nice event with a lot of positive technical information as well as discussions where we will discuss the future of digital technologies as one direction maybe for the changing of our economies and the direction for the future. Thank you again.
Thank you, Christoph. In the early days, the MAG meetings used to be in the September-October timeframe. So there's nothing that says it needs to be in November, December. And certainly autumn in many parts of the world is a lot nicer than in early winter. So there's quite a range of possible dates there. Sandra, you have the floor.
Hi, Lynn, everyone. I just raised my hand substitutionally for my colleague Ili Shebu, who could not charge the computer and log into the queue.
I think Elisho Michael from Zambia government. I have two issues. The first one, though it's water under the bridge, but it would be something that is worth noting for the future IGF meetings. It's in regards to the hosts for 2020. So basically, this is my third year on the MAG. In other ways, I've been a European MAG member because almost every other activities has been happening in Europe. So I'm looking at my other colleagues also who joined probably 2 years ago. They will be European MAG members. What I'm trying to say is, in the way the UN selects hosts, I think there should be a rationale, there should be a deliberate policy. Of course, the UN does not determine who hosts, but there would be hosts who normally approach the agency, as the chair has just described in one of the statements she issued just a few minutes ago. So I'm looking at it this way. Why don't we encourage other nations to host the event like in advance? Like last year, we had issues on who is hosting the 2018 IGF until France came on board on the last minute. As far as June, we didn't actually know where the IGF would take place. We came to Geneva for our second MAG meeting, not knowing who was going to host the IGF until it was clarified it was going to be France. Germany had shown interest. They had given their intentions like 2 years before. Of course, they were ready to prepare for hosting this year's IGF, of which, from the reports we are getting from Chengetai and the IGF Secretariat, is that they are way ahead of schedule, which is way a good thing. But my plea is, beyond 2020, let's solicit for other nations beyond Europe. When I say Europe, I'm not segregating between Western Europe and Eastern Europe. To me, it's all Europe. Next time, we try Asia, we can try North America, we can try Africa, Australia, New Zealand, and other nations that have not in any way, and we rarely even see people from New Zealand and Australia in these IGF meetings. My second point is on the nomination of upcoming new MAG members for the core. This year's core is slightly a little bit different in the sense that for me to nominate someone, the system only allows me to nominate someone from within my actual stakeholder, which is government. In the past, myself, who is from government, I was able to nominate somebody from the private sector or the civil society. But this year, the system is giving us a very huge wall that only allows me or whoever is a nominee within the MAG. I don't know about those outside the MAG, but it's within your stakeholder group. I thought maybe the Secretariat will have to address this issue. Thank you.
Chengetai or Dennis, do you want to address the 2 points?
Sure. About the host country, I can only assure you that we did our best to work with, as I mentioned in the statement, UNECA, UN Economic Commission of Africa, and also UNESCAP, Economic Commission for Asia Pacific. Thailand and Ethiopia were one of the countries that we were trying to bring the IGF to, but unfortunately, we haven't seen the commitment that Lynn mentioned from the government. And that includes the financial commitment and also the political commitment. And we are working hard to take the IGF to other regions. So I can only assure you that that work is continuing, but unfortunately, we haven't reached to any actual outcome. And I think, as I mentioned, Poland making the commitment early, and they also deserve the right amount of time to prepare for the 2020. So we very much appreciate that we have a host for 2020, and we are hoping that other countries for 2021 and onwards will make their interest early. And we hear that actually this morning we had a meeting with one of the potential countries for 2021. So that work is happening. So that's about the MAG. And there were a few other countries other than the UN regional commissions I mentioned, but unfortunately it didn't happen. We haven't seen. So we will continue to bring IGF to other regions, and I also it's the same region. We should all accept that. But I think that as ICANN mentioned, Eastern Europe is a different region within the UN system. But there will be some richer involvement from that region, including maybe from a MENA region. So we acknowledge it's the same region. This was not our first choice, but we need to move forward.
Thank you. Yes, I just want to concur with my colleague here, Dennis. We do try and we do follow multiple threads. Many host countries, or many people who are interested in hosting, and it usually starts with one person from the government who comes to a MAG meeting or to an IGF meeting, and then they have to convince their government to host. So we go through this long line, and sometimes it works out and sometimes it doesn't. So we do try multiple regions, and hopefully next year we're going to be out of Europe, and as Dennis says, Africa or Asia are the most likely prospects now. And we usually don't say that we are investigating, these number of countries, because some countries say, don't say anything until, we are ready to commit. So that's why you may not have heard about these multiple countries that we do go after. As for your question about the MAG and nominating a person from outside your stakeholder group, after consultations with the community, it's also very important. We got the feedback that it's very important that people from one community should nominate their own representatives. They shouldn't have representatives nominated by another community. be it as you giving yourself as a government representative. A government representative should not nominate somebody for the technical community or for the civil society community, because those communities should nominate whom they want to represent them in the MAG. I hope that makes it clear. You said last year you were able to. I think last year was a mistake. If I had known, maybe it was a programming mistake. But no, we do try and keep it that only people from that stakeholder group can nominate the representatives. For the MAG chair, it's different, because MAG chair is supposed to be universal. But for MAG groups, no, that's that. So let me keep quiet. I think we've exhausted our responses here.
Thank you, Chengetai. Karsten, you have the floor.
Thank you. Right now, I guess most of what I would have to say has become obsolete. So, in essence, it's only a thank you to the Secretariat, to Chengetai as well as to Dennis, for the outreach effort, because that was exactly the point I was about to take up as well. That 2 years ago, I had to travel to the neighboring country to the south, to Geneva, Switzerland, and that is. A year ago, I had to travel to the neighboring country to the west, to Paris in France. This year, it's going to be in Berlin, my hometown, and next year it's going to be most likely in Warsaw in Poland, the neighboring country to the east. So within a perimeter of like less than 1,000 kilometers around Berlin, 4 IGF annual meetings took or will be taking place. And so my main point is adding another area, another region of this planet to the map of IGF locations possibly would greatly add to the credibility of the IGF as a process itself. So thank you to you, Dennis, as well as to Chengetai for all your outreach efforts and for the activity to bring new countries on board of future IGF locations. Thank you.
Thank you, Karsten. I can only kind of echo your comments and say that certainly myself, DESA, the Secretariat, and I know MAG members would like nothing more than to be in a different region. So again, given that seems to be a strong desire on the part of many, we really need offers from governments to host the IGF. So really anything we can do to create that kind of increased desire in countries around the world would be much appreciated. Arsene, you have the floor.
Can you hear me? Sure. Thank you very much for the floor. So I would like to come back to the issue that was just been mentioned by Michael with regard to the host country, because I do think that most countries are maybe now reluctant, of coming forward because of the financial commitment, and which is bad in my sense, because I think we'll keep on losing the very good opportunity for rotation just because some countries are not able, to bear the financial burden that is required to them. And I see so many countries from the developing regions won't be able to come forward due to that financial burden somehow. And so I was wondering if there is any way or anything the UN can do, to solve the issue of financial, commitments that is required from some countries. I don't know if the UN is able to raise more funds and say, well, and actually I don't know what is the level of financial commitment that is required from host countries. Like what percentage? Do we say like 80%, 20%, 70%? I don't know. Or, yeah, I mean, I'm just wondering. Thank you.
Thank you, Arsene. Chengetai?
Thank you, Chair. I'll answer your questions from the last one. As far as the financial commitment is concerned, generally speaking, we say that the host country is responsible for all costs of the meeting. And yes, the IGF is a particular type of meeting because, you know, we do have a lot of technical specifications, especially with the webcasting, the transcription, etc. When we've held the IGF in some developing countries, there has been community support for things such as, I know ISOC, when we had it in Kenya, ISOC donated the transcription, and also ICANN stepped in and donated some things as well, and Cisco Systems donated the network equipment. So it does take a community effort. And we have talked to, you know, donor organizations like the European Commission, I mean, last year, and also when we go to Brussels for meetings. And they have been kicking around the idea whether or not they could raise some funds amongst themselves to give financial support for a meeting in the global south, so to speak. Financial support from the UN, as you've heard, we ourselves are struggling, so there will be very, very little financial support that I mean, basically, I'll just say none. We can give services in kind as well, and that's about it. As Dennis was saying, if the country does have a regional headquarters or some offices there, like in Kenya we had UNON, and those costs went, you know, down completely. I mean, they were very, very low because they were using the UN premises there. In Addis Ababa, we also have the ECA as well. So we have premises there that we can use that will not be of a cost to the host country. So the host country just needs to find money for the services, basically. So that's why we've been concentrating on those countries. Also in Thailand, there's a major center, UN center in Thailand as well. So we've been thinking, strategizing, seeing how we can bring the IGF to developing countries.
Thank you, Chengetai. Christine, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Chair. This is Christine Arida talking on behalf of the Egyptian government, the former host of the IGF. I would like to start by congratulating Poland and thanking them for stepping forward to host the IGF in 2020. And I think that shows support that the IGF is receiving, and I hope this can continue as such in further years. I also want to thank Germany for the great preparations for the IGF this year. Very much appreciated the efforts that they have and the resources they have putting into bringing more participants from the Global South. I think this is something well needed. And I wanted to intervene on the issue of the diversity of the host countries. I think we need to acknowledge that this is a build-up process. It's not just something that happens between a day or two where we speak to a government and then they are interested to host. I think this is a process that takes years, and what we're seeing those years in Europe, I would claim, is a result of a good work that's being done on a regional level. I would also claim that Euredig have done a lot of effort in that to bring this built up within Europe. So this brings me to the idea that if we really want to see further diversity, geographical diversity, we should be trying to support regional and national IGFs more. We're already doing a great job. Anya has done a great job, but I think we also need some more institutional support, maybe more resources into that. I appreciate and acknowledge what Chengetai mentioned about capacity building for local regions. maybe we should dig further into how can we put resources to build up momentum within regions for governments to step up. So this is what I wanted to say. It's something that it's a process that will take time, but we should focus on that in a more strategic way. I also think we should. And again, I keep saying that, but I'm glad to repeat it again. We should get the interest of governments somehow within the agenda of the IGF in a more focused way and more strategic way. I understand this year Germany is also doing some effort as a pre-activity for government. I still think we should encourage high-level and senior representative of governments to be within the native agenda of the IGF, not just aside in a pre-conference activities, but have them within the main program of the IGF. Last point I want to make is I want to concur with Jorge from Switzerland. We should maybe also look at the high-level panel and have a track within the IGF this year and next year. I would say this is also something that would do not only good to the overall process, but also to the marketing of the IGF and gain interest in that respect. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Christine. Very good comments. With respect to sort of further collaborating with the NRIs and further support, I think the NRIs are very, very important, and we want to continue increasing the collaboration with them. And if there's some way we can do that, whether that's through some joint working group or an ad hoc effort, it could be as formal or informal as the NRIs like. Very happy personally to engage in that discussion, and I know there are a number of MAG members that would as well, and of course the Secretariat is deeply engaged as well. So maybe we can think about that a little bit more and figure out how we actually take the discussion forward in more depth. And agree as well with respect to the interest of governments. For years we've said we want more senior level policymakers, which obviously includes governments, and also more participation from the private sector. I think to do that, we need to understand what their interests are and what would facilitate their participation, and do that, of course, still staying within the Tunis mandate. But I think we also need to recognize that we need to make some extra efforts, I think, to engage them. And there's no sense in having discussions amongst 2 out of the 4 stakeholder groups. So I think we need to kind of lean into that and perhaps some process changes ourselves, and certainly different types of outreach, I think, would be helpful. And I know there's strong support for the MAG in terms of the desire to have more participation from governments and senior policymakers. Benny, you have the floor.
Thank you. I actually wanted to. No, it's okay. I actually wanted to share the observation that came back when France was the host, and it came really in the last minute, or else we may have ended up having to have the IGF meeting at the UN premises maybe. But when I talked to a government that I have good relations with and asked them about it, and they said, well, our budget is already passed. So it's very difficult to host an IGF when your budget for the year is already accepted by the national parliament in this case. So having said that, that means now the governments are really in a good position, and the community members, the MAG members, anybody who can reach out to their government and UNDESA through the commissions, etc., to talk about 2021, because the negotiations for the 2021 budget most probably will start in the beginning of next year. And that means in many of the countries that could host, and by the way, not every country can host an IGF meeting due to logistics and stuff, as we know. And the second observation is based on the preparation for the IGF in Germany and last year and the years before. It's a huge work. The IGF Secretariat, as we were just told earlier today during the donors meeting, is understaffed because there is not enough budget to hire someone at that level, which means we have to also ask community members, governments, all stakeholders to think about funding the IGF Secretariat Secretariat, because that will make also the IGF preparations easier. When you have more staff on the Secretariat, they can interact with the host country in a better way. They can prepare and organize, because we have to give credits to the current people at the Secretariat for actually making the IGF possible with the small number of people that they have. So it's a complicated and complex situation that now that we know the 2020, now that we see that the MAC, the renewal seems to be on time, in a timely manner. You already mentioned maybe we can, maybe the Secretariat UNDESA and Poland can work on pulling a little bit the IGF from the end of November earlier, as it used to be. You are right. I remember the IGFs, like in Turkey, was in September. And we can go back to the initial planning, which makes more sense from a number of different points of view. So anyway, again, I'm urging everyone to reach out to their community stakeholders and governments, because at the end of the day, without a governmental agreement, a host country agreement, we cannot have an IGF, even if the other stakeholders are ready to host it. That's my appeal for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Vinny. Good points. And of course, there's always the transitions that happen in governments and the elections. And we're finding that there's a fine window when you can actually get in, have a discussion, get a commitment, and be assured that the government will actually still be there when the year comes around. But I think we've had enough discussion on that for the moment. Ananda, you have the floor.
Thank you, ma'am. I was hearing a colleague from Berlin saying that IGFs are being held in the periphery of Berlin. I left home 40 hours ago. I'm just not yet checked into the hotel. I'm just coming directly from the airport. Flight was cancelled and delayed and missed all these flights. So it's very common that every country stakeholders want to host these IGF events. But there are three important issues to hold these events. First thing is the financial issue, because in most of the developing countries, the government is not on board. So only the civil society is active, and they are trying to bring the government and other stakeholders on board. So this same happens in Nepal also. A second thing is logistic issues is also very critical and important. The technical as well as the space, there's multiple parallel sessions. Managing those things are also issues. And third thing is the capacity, human resource mobilization, because the preparation takes a very, very long time. And since activities are very voluntary, finding people committed to the whole year is really difficult. Despite all these things, I'm very happy to let you know that Nepal is hosting the Asia Pacific Regional IGF for 2020 next year. So we really think that we can manage all those issues, the financial, logistics, and also the commitment from the stakeholders. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ananda, and that's excellent news, the IGF. Jim, you have the floor.
Yes, thanks, Lynn. Maybe to assist with Arsene's question from earlier, I know that was a little while ago, but is there any way the Secretariat could give a range of the costs associated with hosting an IGF? I realize they vary widely due to locations and all that, and Chengetai, you talked about assistance, but over the last 4 or 5 IGFs, what was generally the host country budget, and what should people be thinking about if they do want to host? Thanks.
Usually the host country doesn't share the actual costs with us, but those who have, they've ranged it in the $2 million, $3 million mark. I know if there's a UN facility or headquarters there, it's much cheaper than it's in the 1 million mark.
The difference in hosting something in a UN facility, of course, is there's little incremental cost for security and interpretation because that is provided on site already. Carlos, you have the floor.
Yes, in Brazil, the two events were in the neighborhood of $2 million. I remember that. And no, I have a question. Who does the prospective work to find a country willing to host the IGF? Does the UN Secretariat help in this, or leave the work to you? To us, I mean, to the IGF Secretariat and the MAG?
I think it's been largely a shared responsibility between the chair and DESA, but we'll let Dennis.
I mean, I can only repeat that I think it's shared responsibility for all of us to find the next host. We just received a letter of intention when the discussions are materialized at the community level. So, for example, for Poland, Mr. Schuzebert were having the discussions, and then the ministry responsible for hosting the IGF writes to our Under-Secretary General. So that's the formal process. But for finding the next host, for example, we start discussing about 2021 at the working level now. So we try to find some ways, and then that goes up to ministry and then finds our head of department. But it all starts in the corridors, I think. Just one person interested in mobilizing the community and the government there. So it's all our responsibility.
So basically, I mean, there isn't a letter going out, will you host an IGF meeting? We really do have to wait for interested parties to kind of approach us. I mean, in the course of a conversation, we can say, you know, informally, would you consider, but we can't formally say that. You know, the offer has to come from the host country. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I have felt less restricted in asking, but then again, I don't wear a UN badge. You know, I have encouraged lots of people when I come across them to host the IGF, and in past years, Dennis Chengetai and I have sort of worked virtually to look at who were interesting countries in parts of the world, either because they had a strong active community, or they participated deeply in IGF in the past, or they held other similar meetings, and particularly across some of the other ISTAR communities and things. And we put together a list and made some kind of gentle queries. Again, the UN doesn't ask, but gentle queries in terms of interest and that sort of thing. And there is some difficulty in making this list public because a lot of governments in particular want to manage their own communications in country with respect to what they're doing. They want to manage their own communications across ministry in terms of how it's actually moved through and the timing. So they're quite, you know, they're actually quite sensitive discussions within country. You know, I'm hopeful that we have kind of a small but fairly substantive batch of countries that have expressed interest in going forward. I do think that a lot of the recent discussions on internet governance and HLPDC and things have sort of energized some of the interest around the IGF. I think some of the Paris calls, some of the Secretary General's comments at last year's IGF has also brought more recognition of the importance. And to me, it feels like those conversations are being kind of accepted more positively, if you will, or more enthusiastically than they were in the past. So hopefully we'll get to the point, which is where we always wanted to be, that we had commitments sort of roughly 3 years out. Again, that can be a little bit difficult because governments do change, so the ability to future commit too far out is somewhat difficult. But if we can keep the comments, if there are substantive new comments on this, we should keep going. And of course, if this is what the community wants to talk about, we should continue doing that as well. When we feel that we've sort of exhausted this set of discussions, we would actually move into covering some of the preparations for the upcoming annual meeting in terms of the thematic workshops. And I know there's a proposal for perhaps doing some things to support more kind of onboarding and some additional support to newcomers I hope, both those that participate in IGF activities virtually as well as those that come physically to the meeting. So Jim, I think Jim, you're in, is that an old hand?
Yeah, I tried to lower it, but it doesn't seem to be going down.
Okay. And Carlos, I think you're an old hand as well, right? You just spoke. So Christoph, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. A few comments from maybe our perspective to answer a couple of questions, how we decided to apply formally for having the IGF in 2020, so maybe that might be interesting. So actually we started with organizing few local IGFs in the past. Actually the last two, they've been more like a regional, focused on the countries from 3Cs, Central Eastern Europe. So we had the people from 7, 8, 9 countries on our, let's say, local IGF speaking about, of course, the topics which are covered by IGF. We've been speaking about quite broad range of different, let's say, topics or areas from the digital transformation space, mostly about different portions of the digital single market strategy from the European perspective. So we decided to have this discussion as wide as possible to see where the interest is from perspective of different countries. Then we took the decision to apply for the, let's say, big IGF, to host the big IGF in 2020. We started that process like 2 years ago before the time, November 2020, so we decided to have like 2 years time to be able to prepare everything, and at least 1.5 years from the decision to prepare the IGF. So also having in mind a very good comment from Mr. Markowski on the budget. So especially on the governments, it's good to start the discussion on the budget as fast as possible with a longer perspective and have it formally approved. So we've done that. We've been able to proceed with the decision on the cabinet level. So we had a short, let's say, okay from the members of the cabinet to host the IGF in 2020 as an official, let's say, paper, having in mind the comments that may be some changes and stuff like this. So we had it formally on paper, and we actually the cabinet decided to point out the Ministry of Digital Affairs, which is the ministry focused on digitalization in Poland, to be the one responsible for IGF if we will succeed. So it was the type of the decision. Just very shortly, so if you will be having more questions during the breaks or tomorrow, I will be more than happy to support you with the different stages and what we've been preparing from the, let's say, paper perspective to be sure that will be all under control, having in mind different changes which may appear on the way from the starting point to having the IGF. Thank you.
Thank you, Christoph. We have one more speaker in the queue here from the floor, and then, with the room's support, we've moved to the next agenda item. But Indonesia, Donny, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm representing the Indonesian government. First of all, thank you to Germany that will be hosting this year's IGF, also the Poland for the next IGF. I just want to give a brief comment regarding to the advantage of the developing country to host the IGF, especially when we talk about the technical matters as well as the cost that will be handled by the host country. So I encourage the MAC members to maybe you have sometimes to read the full report of the Indonesian report about the IGF 2013 in Bali. There is a full report. You can read it on website igf.id. So there is audited report about the cost, about the money, about the sponsors, also the cost that will be have to pay during the events. This is the very open report. Is already submitted to the UN, also the IGF Secretariat. So if you want to see about what maybe the components already changed because it's 2013 2012, 2013 in Bali, but maybe it's, some components still remain same. So we can have a figure out the cost to run the IGF. So it's audited report, and I encourage you to go to igf.id and try to find the menu and above about the IGF 2013, and you can download it. The report is in English. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Donnie. And I think everybody would agree that Bali was a lovely place to have, have an IGF. The speaking queue is empty now, so I think we'll move to the next agenda item, which is the workshop review and evaluation process. And I'd just like to cover quickly, I think, what the MAG's intent was as we rolled out this process. And then we're going to ask the leaders of the 3 thematic tracks to present sort of the current status of where they are. These are not final conclusions, because that is in fact the work the MAG will do over the next 2 days. But I think trying to build upon some key policy questions and really looking for interaction with the community here. So in response to, frankly, years worth of various suggestions for how we might improve the IGF, the MAG has, every year, I think, tried to react to those suggestions and improve the process. I always say all these processes are continually evolving in any case, because so much of what we're doing is still quite new. But the MAG actually focused on building a more cohesive and a more focused process, wanted to eliminate any redundancy in topics where possible, and also had an objective of really doing everything we could to further increase the collaboration and in some cases the integration of some of the intersessional activities, so the best practice works in dynamic coalitions, for instance, and again, increased collaboration with all of those efforts and with the NRIs as well. We put out a call for issues earlier this year. Based on that call for issues and the predominance of a couple of major themes, the MAG decided to support 3 major themes: digital inclusion, data governance, and one which initially was sort of nicknamed cybersecurity, but because cybersecurity is so vast and covers everything from cyber warfare to spam, we actually broke it out, and it's called Safety, Security, Stability, and Resilience track. The MAG, some working groups within the MAG actually prepared sort of a set of shared a narrative, but meant to be sort of a shared reference for these particular topics, and provided some sample policy questions, literally just to sort of get people thinking about what some of the possible areas might be, not to restrict the input at that point in time. When the workshops came in, the MAG was randomly divided into 3 groups, assuring diversity in terms of region and stakeholder in each one of the 3 groups. And then those groups reviewed all the proposals that had come in the individual tracks. And those groups have stayed with those proposals. What it allowed them to do was build a track that was cohesive, ensure that there was little to no redundancy, but that it also addressed the kind of more consequential policy questions that were coming in through the workshop submissions. And what we're really interested in, as we work our way through this process, so at every step and certainly at the end, at the IGF itself, and really understanding how well we did and how well this works for the community. And we're always interested in ways we might further improve the submission process and the evaluation process, as well, of course, the MAG meeting itself. So I can wait a moment and see if there are any kind of general comments or questions on the overall process or any reflections. We're always particularly interested in hearing from people with respect to how it felt to go through the process. So I'll wait just a moment to see if anybody wants to take the floor. And then what I would propose we do is we walk through the 3 tracks individually, and again, open the floor up for questions on those individual tracks or any questions as well on the overall process. And at some point, I really do want to get to the discussion about what we might do to support newcomers in onboarding processes and that sort of thing. So we'll make sure we cover that. Not seeing any request from the floor. Wanted to see, Chengetai, if there's anything you want to add or anything that I neglected to mention in terms of the process or this year. So with that, then, we would look for a report from the Digital Inclusion Evaluation Group in the MAG. Wait, is Jim waving his hand? He's looking to get in? Okay, Jim, you have the floor, and then we'll go to the Digital Inclusion Group.
Yeah, thanks. It's not scrambling to find the screens, 17 tabs open. From the process, I anecdotally sort of went through some of the proposals that I saw and did some spot checking, and I know that a big emphasis for the MAG over the last few years is to ensure that speakers who are listed in workshop proposals are in fact contacted and confirmed and are aware of their participation. I know of at least a handful of instances, unfortunately, where that is not the case with workshops that were proposed for this go-around. So I know by requiring speakers to register within the IGF platform was a solution a couple of years ago. It looks as though that's not a foolproof solution. I think once you're registered, anybody can add you as a speaker, and if you said yes to being a speaker 2 years ago, you're still in the system as saying yes in perpetuity, ongoing basis. So that's something from a technical standpoint you may want to look for, because as I mentioned, I saw a few folks listed and reached out to them. I said, did you know that you were part of this workshop proposal? And they had no clue. So that's, I think, something that we need to continue to work on and try and refine going forward, because the impacts of having somebody on a panel that isn't participating could skew the workshop evaluation results as well. Thanks.
And I think that's a good point to bring forward to the evaluation group, because I also heard a different sort of issue, which is a fairly senior person had agreed to be on the workshop, and the proposer was actually trying to indicate that, but wasn't in the database. To kind of convince him to be in the database was and to have them actually go through that step, and apparently they did, but they did it with a different email address, and the email address that was matched with. So there's some problems we need to put there. I think to put back in the evaluation group and figure out how we do that a little bit better. Chennai Chair, you have the floor. There you
are. Morning, everyone. I just want to reflect on the evaluating the sessions as a first-time MAG member. And I think for me, what was really interesting was around the diversity section, which really scored high. And obviously, I think from our working group, what we found is that there's a lot of, I think it's more Western European organizers for the sessions, and I think it's because they actually really knew how to write the proposals, that when it came to the section of diversity, they were able to respond to say, and then we will include this and that and that and that, but they'd scored in other sections of gender, on other sections of diversity of the policy question. And then just reflecting on some of the comments in terms of participation within the IGF, in terms of representation from diverse groups, what I've found was that from the moment that the evaluation process is set up, and this of course has been an experiential learning curve for me, is that you will find that you're likely to have more sessions with either organized by the Western European group or likely to have more Western European speakers, and that's because they are able to actually properly craft a session proposal that will go through. And then I think one of the comments I had would have been, how do we follow up on, say, for example, diversity when a session has been noted to actually say, I mean, they do provide a strategy of saying we're going to engage someone once we do know if they're coming to session, which addresses the question earlier raised that you can't just put a person for the sake of diversity. But what are the follow-up mechanisms for the session? And I do know we do suggest once the session is approved, that you need to, if you could improve on this point, but do we physically check to make sure that they actually do have a representative from that group that we're saying you need to be there? Or is it based on a trust system that if the MAG accepts your session and then proposes, you actually have from speakers from either a diverse group or another stakeholder representative that this is done? So for me, that was one of the things that I found concerning or interesting to see how MAG addresses the issue around diversity in terms of the actual participants in the room. Thank you.
No, thank you, Chennai. Those were some very good comments. And I would like to, at this point, I think, to try and restrict the comments to non-MAG members in terms of how they saw the process from their side of the process. And some of these other comments, I think we need to probably bring back into the working group on workshop evaluation and make sure that we address those in the future year, or perhaps it's just some documentation that needs to be upgraded. Marilyn Cade, you have the floor.
Thank you, Lynn. Marilyn Cade speaking. I have a couple of quick comments. One is more futuristic, which I acknowledge, but I would really like the MAG to understand that those who submit workshop proposals who are not approved are probably actually the richest resource in terms of understanding the effectiveness of the guidance and the materials that are provided about how to organize a workshop and submit it. And we learn more sometimes from our failures than our successes. So I hope that there might be consideration of a short survey, not to take up time now, but consider an open survey to learn from what's the feedback from those who were not approved, as well as those that were approved. My second comment is that I reviewed maybe 40 or more of the workshops, just reading randomly. In many cases, I saw that the organizers were primarily from one region or from one stakeholder group, even if they proposed speakers from different groups. There wasn't real diversity geographically or stakeholder group in the submission. I just think it's something we should think about in terms of our guidance, and consider what we're calling on people to do, and take into account what's feasible. I saw a lot of new rigor from the MAG, requests to do this, tick this box, verify this, etc. Unless there's a committed workshop slot, it is very, very hard to get business executives from developing countries in particular. I'm not talking about a policy manager, but a business executive from a developing country to commit to spend the time. And I won't try to speak for anyone else other than that. We're going to go into the report now, but my comments are more about how do we evaluate and take input from those who have been submitters so we don't lose their interest. We don't drive them away because they've submitted 2 or 3 years in a row and never been approved.
Thank you, Marilyn. Those are excellent points, and I'm sure the working group on workshop evaluation will take that up. And I believe there was actually a discussion about doing a post survey, post-submission process survey as well. Thank you. See, the queue is empty. So let's go to a report from the MAG, the Digital Inclusion Evaluation Group. I'm not sure who's going to speak, but I could guess. And it is Paul Rowney.
Paul Rowney here. I'll start the discussion. Sorry, loud. But working group members can chip in. Firstly, we had 106 proposals in the digital inclusion stream. Out of that, we need to try to get down to about 20. It's no mean feat. There's a lot of good proposals. There, as some people mentioned, the process of evaluating the workshops was quite time-consuming, and some information needed might not have been there, but that's for a different discussion. The drive of the evaluation group really was to look at the type of workshops from who's participating, like youth participation, the gender discussions, looking at the themes, skills, education, jobs, access, affordability, infrastructure, local content, multilingualism, governance and policy, and try and ensure that we've got representation that is across those areas to try and remove some of the duplication, possible duplication. We at a point where we're working to finalize the final selection of 20. There's been a lot of work just evaluating the top workshops and looking at the gaps, looking at proposed mergers where we have similar workshops. The balancing around the geographical diversity is an important aspect that we're looking into, as well as the balancing the stakeholder diversity. Our group is meeting later today in preparation for tomorrow to try and finalize the proposed top 20. When we're looking at these 20, we are looking at the flow to try and bring some logical order to the workshops, possibly starting around the actual building the last mile, the challenges around there, access, affordability, community network and infrastructure, and then flowing towards the governance and policy to try and bring some discussion, thought and debate from the problems that are being faced as to why we're not getting everybody connected, and trying to bring that into the discussion towards how this can influence the governance and the policy. So there's not much more I can add. I don't know if there's anything else from any of our working group members, but it is work in progress. We haven't finalized. As I mentioned, we're meeting later to try and concretize down to 20 from the 106, and try and make sure that we get a balanced thematic stream. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. I'll ask if there's anybody else from the working group who wants to come in, or if there are any slides you'd like to show. I think Chengetai was trying to pull up the kind of flow slides if you wanted to have that as a graphic representation of your comments, but the moment may have gone past now. But the slides are all there under the working documents, so as the rest of you go through your presentations, if there is anything you want to put up, you should feel free. We also, in the working groups, asked people to really concentrate, of course, on the policy questions that were submitted. And the policy questions were basically, what is it we want to understand, or what is it we want to advance or progress by having this discussion? I say a lot that if there are a couple hundred people in a room for an hour, that's a really rich, valuable resource, and we should use that as much as possible to try and progress some of these issues. So that's what the policy question was trying to get out. We're also looking at those policy questions in a horizontal approach to see if there's some sort of cross-issue topics that we really should bring forward, either in a main session or if there's some commonality in some of these issues. So we'll be doing that, that review as well in the MAG over the next couple of days. Tamea, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. It's great to be here in this lovely room. I was part of this working group, and as a MAG member, I'm going to try not to speak too much today, but since I was a member of this group, I asked for the floor. Just to complement what Paul was saying, first of all, thank you to Paul for the leadership in the group, and thank you to the group members who worked on it, and thank you to the Secretariat who provided us with very useful statistics to get us started in this work. As Paul said, we were looking at narrowing it down into 20 workshops. We've started it from obviously the top ranked ones, looking to eliminate, to see if there's any duplication that we can eliminate and if there's any gaps to fill, for which the statistics from the Secretariat were really, really helpful. Why we are not showing slides today yet is because we're in still a work in progress, and our slides do include the numbers and titles of some of the sessions, and we don't want to create false hope just now with some of you who might have workshops in the evaluation process. What I wanted to underline though is really that we're looking at creating a flow for the workshops that would look at the various challenges around inclusion and connectivity, and trying to do that from an ecosystem point of view, and making sure that connectivity in our perspective for this track means meaningful connectivity. So we're looking at access and affordability and infrastructure, but also at local content and content creation, content online, multilingual content, also at the skills and education that is necessary, and making sure that everybody around the world has access to skilling and development. And then, as Paul said, a couple of considerations around different social groups and their inclusion as well, such as gender, youth, persons with disabilities, and any other groups who might be in any way experiencing different issues with connectivity. And we're trying to wrap this into, towards the end, if it's possible, into broader governance and policy considerations. So this is our thinking around the workshops that we're looking at, trying to make sure that we pull up those sessions that could speak to these issues, so that those 100 and something workshops, even though not all selected, find their issues in the program. And we are going to encourage as much as possible outreach to similar workshops, mergers where possible. We know it's very challenging once somebody proposes a workshop to pull it together with another workshop, even if the themes are very similar, because you have your speakers, you have your agenda set. But what we are really encouraging people to do is reach out to other organizers, invite them to be part of the session, speak from the floor, and create these communities around similar issues so that people's voices can be heard, if not on a panel, at least contributing to a meaningful discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Tamea. And I think it's a really impressive set of work that all the working groups have done, but I think put an awful lot of effort into really trying to see what we can do to advance some of the more kind of consequential issues over the course of the IGF, and I think that was just described really well by both Paul and Tamea. Any comments or kind of reflections or questions? Then if not, and again, if people can always come back in at any point in time if a question occurs to someone later. Next we'll go to report from the Working Group on Safety, Security, Stability, and Resilience. Not quite sure who's going to...
That's me who's speaking.
Jutta.
Thank you. Jutta speaking for the group Security, Safety, Stability, and Resilience. And we had a little bit less than the Digital Inclusion Group, with about 90 workshop proposals to evaluate. but we were struggling with the broadness of this theme with security, safety, stability, and resilience. And as it was phrased in the narrative for this theme, we were talking about security, stability, and resilience of the systems, the infrastructure, and the devices on the one hand, but also about the safety and resilience of the users. And this is mirrored in the broadness of the 90 proposals, but also in the 20 that we preliminary selected for being suggested for the program. We were very thankful for the Digital Inclusion Group to provide the model for this flow chart for the proposals, because I do think it helped to sharpen the focus on how these diverse under or sub-themes could be grouped together to have a flow within the program and to provide for something like a red file that participants in the IGF could follow. And also this exercise helped somehow to understand where probably some cross-cutting issues were in this track of the theme security and safety that probably might also be cross-cutting with the other two themes, and that could then also maybe be considered for have an additional main session, for example, when we see that 4 or 5 workshops cluster around one theme that is also related to the other two groups. So we are still in the process. We assessed also whether we had only 90-minute sessions or also shorter sessions. So probably with now under the pre-selection we have 5 workshop proposals that had only asked for 60 minutes. So this could provide for space to accommodate 1 or 2 more session proposals that were now listed in the preliminary list. This is a very difficult word for me to speak. And so this should also be discussed further, whether we have some space in main sessions to address some of the issues that came out of this selection of workshop proposals so far. I do invite the other members from the group to add anything that they have in mind that has not been said yet at this point, looking around.
Well, it seems it was a very comprehensive summary then, Jutta. I saw lots of heads nodding from your other working group members. We can move on. Oh, no, Tamea, that's an old hand, I think. So, Sandra, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. I think this topic that this working group was looking at safety, security, stability, resilience, as Jutta already said, covers really a lot of broad issues. And maybe it might be an idea to identify some workshop proposals within the submissions that have the potential to be more of an educational nature. I'm saying this because at Eurodic we made the experience that sometimes there is no clear distinction between what is safety and what is security on or off the internet. And not only that, it's a language issue. In German, for instance, we have one word, Sicherheit. But safety and security is a distinction in an English language, and I'm not so sure how that works in other languages. But I really would emphasize that this working group is looking into opportunities, how to be very clear in the definition of the terms safety, which goes into the safety of the user, maybe in particular also the child protection and all these issues, but then in the infrastructural security of the internet. And these are 2 issues that, at least at Eurodic, are discussed separated from each other. And I would encourage Mark to maybe not separate the issues, but really to make a distinction between what is safety and what is security. And here, a definition of terms with some educational sessions, either on day zero or at the early beginning of the IGF, might help IGF participants to have a better understanding throughout the IGF in the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandra. I think those were good points. And one of the things the MAG has expressed interest in doing is having what we were calling a topping and a tailing session. And I think the tailing session at the end is quite clear. We would hope to take gather all the messages that came from the individual sessions, pull those together, and also use that to see if there's anything that we would want to recommend would go forward to the next MAG with respect to this was a topic that was of interest. It would be helpful perhaps to explore this one in more depth. For the introductory sessions, the MAG hasn't yet had the discussion on whether or not this is sort of an introduction to the track, an introduction to the theme, or or something which might actually be even more strategic and more visionary and be something that really kind of looks forward and maybe kind of outlines some of the challenges or something. So we haven't had that discussion yet. But I don't think we're limited either. If we should decide to go with a more visionary or strategic approach, if we thought that it was useful to have something which was more like an educational session to talk about these different categories, then I think we have room for that as well. And particularly if, again, some of the sessions were only 60 minutes rather than 90, there's some space within that program already to do that. So I think if the working group and the MAG thought that that would be a helpful sort of set of activities, that we have room in the program and room in the track and the process to accommodate it. I think that was a good suggestion. Jutta?
Yes, thank you, Lynn, for giving me the floor again. I do understand Sandra's comment, and it's an issue that I also had brought up, that safety and security are different in different languages, but one word only in Germany. But when we had a look at the proposals, and especially at the policy questions, it turned out that most of proposers did understand the difference. So they were aware of this situation, and they addressed their proposals either to safety or to security, with stability and resilience a bit in between, I would say. But so from the workshop proposals, it's quite clear, and I do think that with the policy questions, we can also, it's a starting point to work with the proposals, and also to try to find, given the broadness of the issue, to try to find some answers and also probably some messages for security and for safety as well at the end of the IGF this year. So I do think that there can be a structure, and as said before, with this exercise of the flowchart, it somehow sorted itself a bit from the security issues of the infrastructure and of the devices, which build the basis, of course, for having safety then for the users as well. So it can give it a flow of thought as well, and probably this will also help to have some useful outcomes at the end of the IGF. Thank you.
Thank you, Jutta. Very, very helpful. Not seeing any other requests for the floor on this topic, let's go to the third theme, which was the data governance evaluation group. And I guess Ben, you have the floor.
Thank you, Lynn. Ben Wallace from Microsoft, for the record. Yes, I coordinated the working group on the data governance thematic stream. So I can talk a little bit about the approach we took. And we've already, I've already circulated the recommendations of our group on the MAG list as well in writing. So we took the following approach. We had 97 proposals, and we were looking to get down to the 20 that the Secretariat allotted us. First, I want to just emphasize that the Secretariat provided a very helpful and detailed statistical analysis. I emphasize that for the non-MAG members that weren't involved in the process. So we had a spreadsheet that gave us information about the top 16 proposals that we received, and about all of the proposals, and that looked at stakeholder representation, geographic representation, what the breakdown of issues was. It included the policy questions, it included comments that each of the MAG members had provided when they on specific proposals. So it was great to have that all in one place and to give us a way of kind of comparing what had ended up in the top 16 with the broader collection of proposals. So as our starting point, we approved the top 16, those that ranked as the top 16 out of the 97, on the basis that they represented the collective view of the MAG members in our working group as to the best proposals. And then we drew on the statistical analysis to try and identify gaps within those top 16 that we could then fill when we look to place the final 4 slots. So we identified the following gaps. In terms of topics, sub-themes, we compared those issues that were represented within the top 16 with all 97, and we found that we were a little bit underrepresented on human rights and internet ethics in particular, and to a lesser extent on accountability and data fairness. So we were looking particularly for workshops in those areas. In terms of stakeholder groups, we found that 53% of the speakers were from one stakeholder group, from civil society. So we were looking for proposals which had speakers from the other stakeholder groups, private sector, government, or technical community. And in terms of geographic regions, as Chinai pointed out, who was also on the data governance group, we had 44% of speakers were from the Western European and others group. So we were, the particularly underrepresented geographic regions for us were GRULAC, Latin American Caribbean, and the Eastern European group. So those were the gaps that we were looking to fill with our final 4 slots in order to kind of balance our final 20. And we've recommended 20 workshops. We should take those 20 slots. I circulated the final version of that on Friday, on the 31st of May. We also included recommendations which should be provided to the proposers of those workshops on how they might improve their workshops. This also included an extra step following our MAG meeting last week to review any comments provided during the evaluation process regarding potential mergers. So where people had suggested that there might be other workshops of a similar topic that could work well, we suggested that the workshop organizer look at whether they can incorporate any concepts, any ideas, or indeed any of the speakers into their workshop to improve it. We did make a few other recommendations. Firstly, as Jutta just mentioned, in relation to the security theme, we noted that the Secretariat had provisionally allotted 20 slots of 90 minutes, and that of our 20 workshops, not all of them were 90 minutes long, so that there could be some spare time freed up for additional slots. And therefore, we proposed 3 additional workshops that could be considered if extra session slots became available. We recommended how the 20 workshops could be viewed thematically, so we organized those workshops into buckets of sub-themes. We did that partly to facilitate our own analysis about what kind of balance we were seeking to strike, but also partly to provide the MAG and the Secretariat with a sub-thematic picture of the data governance workshop stream to potentially inform the scheduling of the program. And we did recommend that when the Secretariat put together the schedule, they avoid scheduling 2 sessions from the same sub-theme at the same time. So we understand, as Chengetai has explained earlier, that there will be 2 rooms allocated to each theme. And for example, there are 2 sessions on cross-border data out of the 20. And we recommend they wouldn't be scheduled next to each other, because if a participant is particularly interested in the topic of cross-border data, they would not be able to attend both sessions. Finally, during our MAG call last Wednesday, the Security, Safety, Stability and Resilience Working Group asked our working group to consider whether a particular proposal on children's privacy and data protection could be taken forward under the data governance theme. So it was proposed under the security theme, but that working group felt that it focused at least as much on data issues. So we reflected on that. It appeared to cover both safety and data governance. It did score fairly well, but it wouldn't have scored enough to make our top 16. Its score was relatively high, and it does look at an issue which isn't explicitly covered within our final 20. So our recommendation was to take this forward as a cross-cutting proposal, which looks at both online safety and data governance, and that it be allocated a slot created from minutes not used by the 40 sessions already put forward by our 2 working groups. Yes, so thank you.
Thank you, Ben. That was another good comprehensive review. Any comments or questions? Any other working group members that want to supplement what Bill said? What Ben said? Okay, not seeing any. As was indicated through all 3 of the groups, that's one of the significant pieces of work the MAG will be doing over the next couple of days, which is finalizing those individual tracks, looking for any cross-cutting issues, and deciding what we want to do in terms of topping and tailing those themes and main sessions. We actually have a pretty, I think, unique opportunity this time with the main sessions, in that historically when we've had 6 or 8 or 10 tracks, we've typically dedicated a main session to each one of those tracks. With this new focus on the 3 tracks, we could certainly do main sessions focus on that. We could do main sessions to really invite some inspirational speakers, use it specifically to perhaps craft some sessions that actually allow us to outreach to different communities, which of course is something the Secretary General exhorted us to do in his comments in Paris. So we have, I think, some kind of really interesting real estate, if you will, in terms of bringing that forward. Karsten's in the queue. Karsten wanted to talk a little bit, I think, about some onboarding and maybe some things we can do with the newcomers. And if you could bring that forward, if your comments were related to something else, that's fine as well. But then if you could actually bring that other idea forward. We have traditionally had a newcomers working group. It's sort of been a little bit of an ad hoc working group between the Secretariat and a couple of MAG members. And that also is another open question in front of the MAG as well, which is what we want to do to support newcomers, certainly as they attend the annual meeting, but I also think it's important to think it as how do we want to support newcomers coming to the IGF, all of our intersessional activities, and in a virtual capacity as well. So I think that's some new work we'll be taking on. Karsten?
Yeah, thank you, Lynn. This is exactly what I was about to mention, to speak about. There's a small group of people, and in the course of the upcoming IGF, the annual meeting, we thought about exactly that, a newcomers initiative, an onboarding initiative, just to bring all those that are really pretty new to the IGF up to speed about what's going on. So in essence, the idea is twofold, in the way that it's like a across all the three main tracks that we've just spoke and heard about. And as I said, it's twofold. The first one is to create an more or less comprehensive repository of information and knowledge for all those that are about and have plans to attend the upcoming meeting here in Berlin, as well as any other forthcoming meeting later on in Warsaw and 2021, wherever that is going to be, as well as an on-site, say in that regard, offline activity with a slot that we've requested for day 0, because we thought it just doesn't make any real sense to have an onboarding workshop, or whatever the final title will eventually be, during the IGF, because if it's going to be slotted in just for the second day, for example, then half of the meeting is already gone, and an onboarding workshop just doesn't make any real sense any longer, at least as much as I'm concerned. And so the idea is, as I said, to prepare training material, knowledge material in the course of getting to the IGF in November, and then having essentially, at least that is what I foresee right now, sort of like a Q&A. That should be the day 0 workshop, a Q&A function where people that have read the material, the onboarding material, can then ask specific questions of items that haven't really been understood yet, or are still open as questions for them. And the onboarding online material that we envisage is not meant to be a copycat, but rather or just copy material or duplicate material, but rather take what's online available already, to review this material and also to edit this material together with the editors that would feel responsible for the online material anyways already, and then essentially maybe just link these materials from a central IGF repository to where they are originally hosted. That is the plan right now, and of course I would like to ask everybody in the room here, as well as being available online, for their support. And we already have a little bit of support, but obviously would like to get more support, ideally, but also, of course, financially. So that is essentially what I would have to say about the onboarding activity. Please see me, send me emails, see me around here today as well as tomorrow or on Friday for any further details, how we can get this ball rolling of enabling people with comprehensive knowledge to bring them up to speed for the upcoming IGF. Thank you. Or further questions? Any further questions?
While everybody's looking for the queue or waiting, and before I turn to Chengetai, were you considering a specific platform, or was it more maybe just a different structuring or organization of materials that would be posted on the IGF website?
As I said, we have a couple of supporting organizations already. One is Wikimedia, so most likely this is going to be the repository we envisage right now is going to be something in the Wikimedia style. And the support of Wikimedia goes so far that they would like to bring us into contact with editors of articles in Wikipedia that are on track already, so that these articles can be linked and or reviewed and or edited to, well, be as precise as possible for the upcoming IGF meeting, as well as for any further IGF annual meeting.
Thank you, Karsten. Chengetai?
I'll come and see you later with Anya as well to see more information. Thanks.
Well, I mean, is there, we used to have Miguel, who was really, very active in kind of newcomers and really encouraging us to kind of look broadly and somewhat creatively at what we could do to actually make the IGF more accessible and more understandable. And a piece of that was some newcomers activities. It was also other activities. I don't know if it's worthwhile seeing if there are any MAG members that would want to participate in an ad hoc working group with the Secretariat and with Karsten to just flesh that out a little bit. I mean, on the surface, thinking about doing something with Wikipedia or Wikimedia is interesting in terms of potentially reaching out to some different audiences. I'm sure there are some considerations within the UN system for doing that properly, though. But do you have something written up? Is there something you could post to the MAG list so we could specifically see if there were some MAG members that wanted to join in that discussion?
Yes and no. Obviously, we've submitted a proposal for the day zero. That is the sponsor, let me put it this way, because we had to put an organization into the form. The sponsor of that initiative is the ISOC chapter DC. So if you like to look for who's the sponsor of that, then it's the DC chapter of ISOC. And in terms of like material, that was meant to be ready by today or by this week. Unfortunately, it's not yet finalized, and we are still in the process of finalizing that. So, but should be done within a couple of days.
Okay, thank
Lynn,
you.
Lynn, it's Marilyn. I can't seem to raise my hand.
Okay, hi, Marilyn. Marilyn, you have the floor. It was like
Thank
God
you.
speaking from above.
I like that characterization. I think though it's called goddess, not God. I do have a question, and I posted something in the chat. My experience with these sessions is mixed. Sometimes they're very effective for brand newcomers because the newcomers meet and then are able to continue to engage with people that they meet who speak and can become almost their spirit guide to the IGF. One particular approach that was taken, I had very senior government officials just get up and walk out because it was here's how the internet works. It was, they came to learn about how the IGF works. And so my question to Karsten is, is your focus on trying to provide an overview of the process of being individually effective at the IGF, or are you trying to focus on providing a kind of a guidebook to who said what and what the existing resources are where different topics have been addressed? And I say that because a factual portrayal of here's how the IGF works, here's how to be most effective, I think that's kind of a coaching and mentoring. Getting into choosing different policy perspectives and what to advance over one perspective over another puts the IGF in a kind of a difficult situation because what you emit might be what's viewed by some groups as being more important than what is included. So I'm just trying to understand, is it process or is it content?
Thank you, Marilyn. Karsten?
That's a good question. Thank you, Marilyn. I guess at the end of the day, it might be a bit of both because for sure it's going to be content because at the end of the day, content is knowledge, knowledge is content. So helping people to get prepared for the IGF without any kind of content, just pure process, possibly wouldn't really do the show. So in this regard, I would say it's content, but also it's process. To some extent, just to, I'm repeating myself here, just to help people to understand, in particular, like the real newbies, to help them understanding what the IGF is about. And so, at the end of the day, I will take your views or your recommendations even into account and bring it to my group to see whether we should focus on content, which I understand you wouldn't really recommend, not strongly, or wouldn't really strongly recommend, and but also to think about process. And the third part is when it comes to the idea, questions like how would the internet work. At the end of the day, I feel it every day when I speak to people about internet policy issues that at times, at least, there is a sort of a lack of knowledge about the very fundamental issues of the internet, as in there is no central network control where the internet can be controlled by, because it's a network of network operators, or a network of networks that's being operated by autonomous individual network operators. So I guess to some extent to be involved in the discussion and to have meaningful understanding of what's going on at the IGF, a certain fundamental basic knowledge about what the internet itself is might be helpful as well. So most likely this is going to be included in our activity as well. Thank you. Did that answer your question or your comment?
She's putting a comment in the chat room, which is not to suggest you don't address content, but to note that if you are a newcomer, it's very important to understand what will be addressed, which I think is a very good point, obviously, and certainly truth in advertising and all the sessions at the IGF. Maybe I could ask the Secretariat to work with you to look at the Day Zero event, because I'm not familiar with that, sort of understand what the proposal is, maybe take another kind of spin at it, if you will, and then ensure it's in front of the MAG so that we can get some additional support or view. But thank you for bringing that forward. I mean, certainly newcomers are important, facilitating anybody's participation in the IGF, whether that's online or during the physical annual meeting itself, is all critically important. And I think making use of a lot of creative ways of doing that is also important.
Happy to do so, thanks.
Particularly if we really want to focus on youth too, because of course Wikipedia and things are such critical resources for them. We're actually at the lunch break now. The schedule today is a little bit unusual. That normally we go from 10 to 1 and then pick it up again from 3 to 6. We're stopping here at 12:30. I believe there's actually lunch provided by the German government one floor down where the coffee was this morning as you came in. We will start back up at 2 o'clock sharp local time, because we have a short address from a German government representative here, and then we will continue through the rest of the afternoon with the program. As that is a rather unusually long time, 4 hours, for those who are doing the math, there is actually a coffee break scheduled in the middle of the afternoon. So lunch break 12:30 to 2, back here sharply for 2, and we will see you this afternoon. Thank you very much. And I certainly hope everybody that's participating online is able to come back as well for this afternoon. So thank you.